Leonardo DiCaprio was sitting in first class when everything changed. A man suddenly rushed down the aisle, clearly in distress. The other passengers gasped, and security jumped into action, ready to tackle him. But DiCaprio saw something in the man's eyes that others missed. "Wait," DiCaprio commanded, raising his hand. "Something's wrong here." The security team froze, and all eyes turned to the scene. The man was shaking, his eyes darting around the cabin like a trapped animal. "What's your name, soldier?" DiCaprio asked, noticing the military bearing despite the man's obvious distress. "James Morrison, sir, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines," he managed to say between sharp breaths. The plane's engines roared louder during takeoff, and Morrison invisibly flinched, grabbing onto a seat for support. That's when it clicked for DiCaprio. This wasn't a threat. This was a veteran having a PTSD episode. The confined space, the engine noise, it was all triggering combat memories. "Everyone, back up. Give us some space," DiCaprio ordered, his voice firm but calm. The other passengers and crew stepped back, watching as DiCaprio approached Morrison slowly. "You're safe here," he said, guiding the veteran to an empty seat. "Let's talk this through." Morrison's hands were still shaking, but his breathing started to steady. As DiCaprio sat next to him, Morrison explained in a voice barely above a whisper, "They take me right back there." DiCaprio leaned in, speaking quietly but with conviction. "I've met many heroes like you," he said. "Warriors who've seen things most people couldn't imagine. But right now you're on a commercial flight to Chicago, and you're safe for the first time since the incident began." Morrison's eyes focused clearly on DiCaprio's face, not seeing the famous actor, but someone who, in that moment, truly understood his pain. DiCaprio settled into the seat beside Morrison, creating a small bubble of calm in the tense cabin. "Tell me about it," he said simply, giving the veteran space to share his story. Morrison took a deep breath. 3 tours in Afghanistan," he started, his voice steadying as he spoke. "I lost 4 of my closest friends in an ambush. The sound of those engines, it's exactly like the helicopters that came too late to save them." The other passengers, who had initially reacted with fear, now listened in respectful silence. DiCaprio nodded, keeping his full attention on Morrison, and asked about civilian life, though he already knew the answer from countless similar stories. "It's been hell, sir," Morrison admitted, his shoulders slumping. "I can't hold a job. The VA is backed up, and I've been sleeping in my car for the past 2 months." He paused, shame crossing his face. "I was headed to Chicago for a job interview. I used my last dollars for this ticket." Then the panic hit. DiCaprio's expression hardened, not with anger, but with determination. He turned to his personal assistant. "Get me Mark," he said, referring to his veteran affairs coordinator, "and call ahead to Chicago. I want arrangements made before we land." A flight attendant, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. "My brother," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He went through something similar after Iraq. He found help." "Mr. Morrison, he's doing better now," DiCaprio observed as Morrison's posture changed slightly. The simple knowledge that he wasn't alone was making a visible difference. Other passengers began sharing their own connections to veterans, creating a ripple of support throughout the cabin. "You know what strikes me?" DiCaprio said loud enough now for others to hear. "Harry's a man who risked everything for his country, showed incredible bravery in combat, and now he's fighting a different kind of battle back home." "That's not right." Morrison straightened up a bit. "The hardest part, I confess, is feeling invisible. People see a homeless vet and look away. They don't want to know our stories." "Well, I'm listening now," DiCaprio replied firmly, "and I'm going to make sure others do too." He pulled out his phone, quickly typing something. "I just posted about meeting you today. Millions will hear your story within hours." The plane hit some turbulence, and Morrison tensed again. DiCaprio immediately engaged him in conversation about his military service, redirecting his focus. "Tell me about your proudest moment over there," he prompted. Morrison's eyes lit up slightly. "There was this village," he began, and for the next 20 minutes he shared stories of protecting civilians, building schools, and the brotherhood had found in his unit. The other passengers listened, many wiping away tears. DiCaprio's assistant returned with news. "Everything's arranged in Chicago, sir. Housing, therapy appointments, and 3 job interviews next week." "Good," DiCaprio nodded, then turned back to Morrison. "But that's just the start. Your story is going to help us show what needs to change in the system." Morrison looked at DiCaprio with disbelief. "Why would you do all this?" he asked. "Because 20 years ago someone took a chance on me when I was at my lowest," DiCaprio revealed, surprising everyone with this personal admission. Not with money, I had that, but with belief. Sometimes that's all it takes to turn things around. The cabin had transformed from a scene of potential crisis to one of unexpected community. Passengers were exchanging contact information with Morrison, offering their own networks and support. The flight attendant, who had spoken about her brother, was arranging to connect Morrison with veteran support groups in Chicago. DiCaprio sat back, watching it unfold. This wasn't about politics or publicity. It was about something I understood deeply, the power of a second chance and how success often comes from someone simply taking the time to listen and act. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, the transformation in the cabin was remarkable. Morrison, who had started the flight in a state of panic, was now engaged in conversation with several passengers who had military connections. DiCaprio's social media post had already gone viral, with thousands of veterans sharing similar stories. "Mr. DiCaprio," Morrison said, turning to face him, "I need you to know something. What happened today, it wasn't just about the help you're giving me. It was about being seen, really seen." DiCaprio nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. "Sometimes the biggest impact we can have is just acknowledging someone's struggle," he replied. "But now comes the hard part. You have to keep fighting, just like you did in uniform." The flight attendant approached with her phone. "Mr. Morrison, my brother's veterans group in Chicago is waiting to meet you at the airport. They're going to be your support system." Other passengers started sharing their contact information and resources. A business executive offered to mentor Morrison through his job search, and a psychologist gave him her card offering free counseling sessions. The community that had formed in those few hours showed no signs of dissolving. "I had a speech prepared for my job interview," Morrison admitted with a slight smile. "I never thought I'd be walking in with Leonardo DiCaprio's endorsement." Instead, DiCaprio laughed, but then turned serious. "You were in this support long ago on the battlefield. We're just finally delivering on that promise." As the plane touched down, DiCaprio's assistant confirmed the arrangements: temporary housing in a veteran-focused facility, appointments with top PTSD specialists, and job interviews with companies known for supporting veterans. "There's one more thing," DiCaprio said, pulling out his business card. "My direct line is on the back. If you hit any walls, you call me. No one who served our country should feel alone in their struggles." Morrison stood as the plane taxied to the gate, straighter and steadier than when Head first appeared in the aisle. The other passengers applauded spontaneously, not for DiCaprio's intervention, but for Morrison's courage in both his service and in facing his demons. "You know what today taught me?" DiCaprio said, addressing the cabin. "We all have the power to change someone's life. It doesn't take billions. Sometimes it just takes 5 minutes to stop and really see someone." As they prepared to disembark, Morrison turned to DiCaprio one last time. "Sir, how can I ever repay this?" "Pay it forward," DiCaprio replied simply. "Your story is going to help a lot of other veterans find their way home too." The impact of that flight continued long after landing. Within hours, DiCaprio's social media post about Morrison had reached millions, sparking a national conversation about veteran care and PTSD awareness. But more importantly, it sparked action. Morrison's story became a catalyst for change. The job interviews DiCaprio arranged turned into more than opportunities. One company was so impressed by Morrison's experience that they created a new veteran outreach program with him as the coordinator. 3 months later, Morrison stood in front of a group of veterans at a Chicago support center. "I was invisible," he told them, "until someone chose to really see me. Now it's our turn to see each other." The flight attendant's brother had become one of Morrison's closest friends, and together they developed a peer support network for veterans struggling with PTSD. The program specifically focused on helping veterans during triggering situations like air travel. DiCaprio kept his word. He didn't just walk away after the flight. His team worked with veteran organizations to create better support systems, using Morrison's experience as a template for identifying and helping veterans in crisis. 1 year after that fateful flight, Morrison returned to DiCaprio's office in New York. He wasn't the same man who had stumbled down that airplane aisle. He stood tall, confident, and most importantly, at peace. "You know what I learned?" Morrison told DiCaprio during their meeting. "Sometimes our darkest moments lead us exactly where we need to be. That panic attack on the plane, it ended up saving not just my life, but others too." DiCaprio nodded, remembering the scared veteran from the plane. "Sometimes the best investments aren't in buildings or businesses," he replied. "They're in people who just need someone to believe in them." The story of DiCaprio's and Morrison's encounter became more than just a viral moment. It became a reminder that behind every struggling veteran, there's a hero waiting to be seen again.